that said, I really am excited about the creative ways that you're looking at the budget, the depth in which the team has gone, and really hope that we can find positive solutions to where we are right now with the shortfalls.
Thanks, Anne. I don't see anyone else, although I do just want to make a clarification. There was a comment in the Q&A. I just want to clarify in terms of when we say leadership council and what the difference is between their role, the finance committee, and the board. So the leadership council, and Sandy, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is made up of Sandy, Diane, Kate, and then all the department heads and principals. And so what we'll review today and what's been presented to us thus far, to the finance committee thus far, is a leadership council budget proposal. And then after first reading and under normal circumstances, and we're trying to stick to that as much as possible, that budget then is sort of, the baton is passed to the finance committee. So the finance committee, in collaboration with the leadership council and the folks who are on the call today, kind of go back and forth and figure out something that we're comfortable with, which we'll then ultimately recommend to the board for vote at our second read. A lot of different things can happen between then. We can get a different directive from town council, but ultimately that's like the normal flow of the process and how our roles are different. Okay. I did just want to say one more time, because I know we've had many more people attend since the meeting started. We do take public comment at the end of our finance committee meeting. So this is scheduled to go till 3. So around 2:45, we'll stop and we'll take public comment at that point. If you do have a question, just go ahead and raise your hand if you're in on the Zoom meeting, and we'll allow you to speak. If you're on the YouTube meeting, which I think is now live, yes, thumbs up, yeah. Okay, Sandy's giving me a nod, yes. If you're on the YouTube and you have a public comment, you can submit your question or comment to publiccomment@scarboroughschools.org. And with that, I think, Kate, if you don't mind taking us through the latest updates to the FY21 Leadership Council budget reductions. We can start there.
Hi, guys. So I'm talking about roles. I'm the compiler of the document, but I'm not the expert on the content. So I'm going to ask Sandy and Diane to speak to the items that are included here. And particularly, I mean, this is kind of a laundry list of the things that the leadership team has spent, as you said, the last several weeks trying to come up with to make revisions to the budget that will achieve the directive that the town council has given to us. And, you know, the list is, I think the details on the list are pretty self-explanatory, but I think the impacts and what they really need is what needs to be shared in this conversation. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's really what we need to understand.
Yep, I think April has a question before we dive in. You're on mute, April.
Sorry, trying to go back and forth between my laptop and another screen. Just for people who are watching at home and who are looking at that PDF that got posted to the supporting documents, the page that we have posted right now is page 109 of that document, if you want to look at it at home.
Thank you.
All right. So for those who have been watching along with this process, we started on the 28th and 29th of April with our finance committee on the school board side, and then the joint finance committee, going through a document that was very similar to this, that had 4 tiers in it of reductions that ultimately took us from the first reading budget that the school board approved down to, sorry, talking and trying to scroll here, down to the 4th tier, at which point we achieved the reduction that was needed to hit the 2% tax rate increase target. What we've got here today is a much more detailed version of that same document, where if you looked at that one in any depth, you'd have seen categories of amounts. What this does is blow out that document and give you every single line detail that was touched by the leadership team in their suggestions. And then also incorporated in the material that we've sent out is the original accounts detail showing what was originally budgeted, proposed for that first reading of the school board, and then what reductions have been made and where we would land if we took those reductions line by line in the GL accounts that folks are taking a look at. How would you like to proceed? Do you want to go on with questions? Do you want to read down through? Do you want to have us speak to everything, or what are you thinking?
I think for transparency, I think it's probably best to go through everything from top to bottom.
Okay.
Although we've seen this, I know that there's been some changes, and so having the full picture would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll maybe we could tag team it a little bit here.
When do you want questions, Sarah?
Fire away.
When do you want questions?
Yeah, whenever, as we go, I think is probably appropriate from us.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to try to make this just, I'm having a little trouble with my screen. I'm going to try to make this just a little bit smaller so it fits the screen better. I hate to do it because then people probably have to read these tiny little words, but I think I was going off the screen there a little bit. Let me know if you're seeing things clearly or not.
You see it pretty clearly now.
Okay, perfect. So I will point out, I'll start by pointing out that there were a couple of things in Tier 1 that we changed in the past week. Excuse me. In Tier 1, we didn't have any staff reductions because obviously the first thing that we want to do is try to stay away from human beings and reduce supplies, services, and the like. So in the beginning of Tier 1, we've been talking for the past couple of weeks about what we're calling here COVID-19 responses. And you know, everybody's reading and watching information coming out from our various regional and national authorities about how to manage opening up and returning to normal while this virus is still out there and while there's no vaccine for it. So that guidance is evolving pretty much on an hourly basis. What we've done here that's different from the last thing that we—
Hey, Kate.
Yep.
So sorry to interrupt you. I just want to chime in. It sounds like YouTube isn't working. Kelly, I'm wondering if you could make a post and just direct people to Zoom, similar to what we did last week.
Yes, I will do that right now.
That's too
We
bad.
are
Thanks, Kelly.
recording it, so we will make sure that it is able to upload like we did last week.
Yeah, it's funny because it says it's streaming, but then it doesn't go.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, sorry, Kate. Carry on.
That's okay. I won't be quite as famous, but we hope everybody makes it to Zoom. This kind of fame I can live without. So you'll see in the beginning under the funding for COVID-19 responses, there's a couple things that are marked in red. Those are items that we've added. We spoke about them in our first meeting, but we didn't have numbers for them. And what we've done is we've added in some funding for actual it's construction really of separate spaces in the clinics, particularly at the K2 schools, based on some guidance we're getting from the state school nurses. And then some extra for mostly for PPE, which is personal protective equipment, I believe is the right acronym. Things like face masks and shields and gloves that we wouldn't normally use. So you'll notice that's $128,000. And you'll also notice that when we get to Tier 2, there has been a further reduction. We currently have an open position, the K-12 improvement strategist, position was budgeted at central office in the curriculum and improvement of instruction department. That's the role that has been and still is currently filled by Kathy Terrell, who has just accepted the position of principal at Scarborough Middle School for next year. So that position being vacant, and the back and forth conversations with the leadership team about that position and how to rework things, we decided to put that on the table here as a reduction to offset additional spending that we believe will be required to address COVID-19. So that's what's changed since the last visit to this. And I'm going to go back up to the top of tier 1, and I'm going to let Sandy or Diane, whoever wants to jump in and sort of walk us through the sections here.
Can I ask a question before you move on?
Sure.
The 40,000, I can't remember if that was in the last proposal or not for the trauma informed practice in the distance learning professional development.
Yes, that professional development funding is actually offset by reductions below. What we're saying is that we have reallocated existing funds that we would have used for summer learning and curriculum. And it's really what our summer learning and curriculum needs to be right now is very different from what we would normally do. So the $40,000 was in as an expenditure and then offset by a reduction below.
And
that was in the beginning, or the first version of this.
I would say that my interpretation of one of the themes from feedback was regarding professional development. Do you know where that leaves us in terms of spending on professional development?
I think the best way to figure that out would be to take a look at the individual line items, but I can get you a total from that. And you'll notice as we go through here that there, in this first tier, sorry, it's kind of jumpy when I move it. Each one of our departments or schools has taken a reduction in their staff development lines. And I think I made a comment, I don't remember whether it was an email or a document that's been posted, but we talked about I forget the word, but non-local travel. What we were talking about was
non-routine travel.
Professional development opportunities outside of what we would do here in Maine and what we would normally do, like traveling to a national conference or a workshop out of state. And so the answer to that question is that most of those funds are in the staff development lines that you see all through each cost center in the budget. And since those professional development lines have been reduced, and what we do have is going to be targeted toward just surviving and thriving in this new climate, what kinds of skills are we going to need to be able to help our students and their families navigate this new world that we're in? So there's a commitment across the leadership team that we're not really going to be going any place and doing anything usual in this coming year.
Thank you.
I'll make a note too, Alicia, to see if we can get a sort of before and after summary, because I know they're split out in the individual account.
It's hard, yeah, it's hard to try to discern. Thank you.
Not to beat a dead horse, which I've probably hit on this channel before, but we are required by the Department of Education to provide individual line items for every cost center and every expenditure. So we end up with 600 different line items, and if we had it our own way, we'd probably have those things lumped together a little more easily, but it's because we have to report to Department of Education in Maine and also to the feds under those lines. So see if we can't pull that together a little. Anybody want to jump in?
I would just say that, again, obviously early in this stage in tier 1, you're just doing the best you can to trim the discretionary accounts, and that's what we've done here. We've left some money in certain lines, but again, that was early on in the budget season, and the administrators really worked together to try to find these cost savings. It will have an impact, but certainly, given the circumstances, we feel like this is what we could put forth and still open the doors and teach kids well.
I do have another question on Tier 1, Kate. It looks like instructional supplies have been reduced from most schools except for the high school. Am I reading that correctly? And if so, can you just elaborate on why that is?
I would say that we've given each school leader the opportunity to go through their budget and decide what's the most critical and what they can defer. So you'll look at the dollar amounts are very similar across the schools based on student population, but where they've chosen to target their reductions has varied from one phase to another. And it happened that the high school had more funds in their books line because of a budget jump in that line, and they felt that would be a more appropriate line to reduce than their instructional supplies line, which is pretty static.
Are we doing all of Tier 1 questions right now?
That makes sense.
So I had a question about the contracted transportation on page 2 of Tier 1 reductions. It appears to me that it's identified as high school athletics contracted transportation at $20,000. And when I looked at the budget book, it appeared to me as though it was $80,000 overall for contracted transportation. So I'm curious about why the cost is related solely to high school, if that's related to the proposed budget cuts by the Leadership Council, and also why our contracted transportation costs are still so high when we are in a better place having filled more of our transportation positions. If you could explain that to me, that would be helpful.
So I think I understand your first part of your question as why is that contracted transportation line coded to high school sports? And the short answer to that is that it's for ease of recording, and that is the place where we've spent most of our money. There has been high school sports. There have been some middle school things that have gone out of that line. But we've kept it all under that the high school sports line because that's where the bulk of the contracted buses have been used. And we did reduce that line, but we also have a worry that our bus driver staff, although we were in a pretty good place towards the beginning of the school year, finally, we do have a worry that that's still a volatile population. Folks who want to drive school buses are a rare breed, and we didn't want to completely eliminate the contracted amounts, especially because of the way that the school schedule runs. And if athletics at the high school start at 2 o'clock, and our bus drivers are on a run to pick up students at Wentworth and the K2s at 3 o'clock, we still can't use our own drivers. We don't have a lot of spares right now.
The good news side of that story is that we are reducing that line by 25% because we do feel like, to your point, Alicia, that we have been able to fulfill a whole lot more transportation needs from our own staff without having to contract out to the degree with custom coach that we had done in the past.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't mention the last piece of the Tier 1 reductions, and I'll just make a sort of a blanket comment about the capital reductions, because The CIP means capital improvement projects. The capital budget isn't part of the general fund budget. It is included sort of separately when you get to these summaries. All of these nice little tiered boxes that change over each of the tiers is all related to the general fund, which is the K-12 operating budget. And then down at the bottom of each tier, there's a little line that says, and oh, by the way, there's an additional tax reduction for CIP, which is carried through. The reason that these projects and reducing or deferring these projects has an impact on the tax rate is because even in the capital budget, some projects are bonded, meaning that the town issues municipal bonds to pay for them. Capital projects can be leases, capital projects can come from reserve funds, but capital projects can also come from appropriated funds, meaning local tax dollars. So for each of the projects that are included in this section, the funding was scheduled by the town finance office, who makes these decisions, to be appropriated money, meaning tax dollars. Meaning that if we were to step back on some of these projects and reduce their scope or defer them, or whatever the notes are telling you that we're doing about it, it will directly impact and reduce the tax rate for this coming year.
Kate, question on the CIP budget. In the proposed budget right now, there's a line for $100,000 for long-range planning. I believe the intention was actually to, well, originally, sort of months ago now, was to actually increase that and have that go towards the planning for a consolidated primary school. But that number would have been higher, and it's not. It stayed at 100,000. So I guess I'm just curious as to what that would be used for, and if that's another area of potential CIP reductions, given that it's scheduled to be appropriated and not bonded.
I think that's a really important area of conversation. I think that the board has some upcoming conversations about where we are with our intent around a new primary school. We've been sort of traveling along two different tracks. One track being, trying to plan forward for that eventuality, and the other track being the world kind of coming apart, it seems, around us. So I don't know whether the board will intend to move forward with a reduced scope with that work. If the board says we want to move forward, we want to do some planning, we want to do perhaps some design work or some site selection work, then we could use that $100,000 towards that work. We simply wouldn't increase it to allow for the full scope of work that we had originally considered. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Obviously, if the board says, you know what, we really have, there's no work that we want to do in FY21 that we're going to need those funds for, then yeah, absolutely, that would be something you'd want to take a look at.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have other questions about Tier 1? Do you want me to slide her down here? Oh, I will say that the other sort of outlier piece on Tier 1 is that bright green line here. And you'll have to remind me, because I feel like I've looked at this stuff day and night for the last 2 weeks. So if there are things that I'm not calling out that we think that the public might need to know, just give me a shout here. Applying additional fund balance as non-tax revenue, that flows through the whole document as well, and it's this bright green line that you see. It's not a reduction in expenditures, it's an increase in non-tax revenues, which again, the more non-tax revenues that we have, that will also impact the bottom line tax rate and the requests that we ask for from our community. So that's included all the way through as a reduction to the tax ask of the school department.
I think this is probably an appropriate time to ask the question, just because we're talking about CIP. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten has been around the necessity for updating our turf and track. And I know that doesn't sit within our CIP, that sits within the town CIP. But maybe, I don't know if Sandy or Kate or whoever has the latest update could just give some clarification as to what is budgeted and what those funds would go to, if it's towards a complete renovation or if it's just a repair.
I don't know that. I'll hand that one off to Sandy.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth on this all year. And originally we wanted to just do the whole turf all over. And that kind of went south. So I think, to be honest with you, I think we're just trying to think ahead, knowing that the turf is in not great shape. Is there a way that we could make some modifications to it without a total revamp? But now with the virus going on and the budget concerns, I think truthfully, we just need to sit down with the town and look ahead. And given all the budget considerations and challenges, I would say right now it's on hold. There's not anything that we're going to do next year necessarily, given what's in front of us with the reductions, to make the turf a top priority. It's a need. It needs to have a maintenance plan, and it's just going to have to be combined with all the other conversations of the wants and needs and what rises to the top. That's really where I see what we're at. And if we don't do something down the road, you know, I just think it's poor planning. So my hope is that we can revisit with the town and just try to put our heads together and see what would be the best logical step.
This isn't directly related to the turf question, but it is, was your hand up, April?
It was.
Sorry, I can't even see it.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, I'll go next.
Sorry about that. But I do have a question about how much we pay to the town to use the fields for school-run sports and activities. And I still don't understand where that comes from, and so we're asking for money to fund these activities, but then we're paying it to the town, and then the town decreases that money, and then we're, you know, maybe we're paying the town less. And so that seems really circular to me, and I'm wondering if there's a way to have a discussion with the town about, first of all, I'd like to know those costs, I guess, and second of all, I'm wondering if there's a way to have a discussion with the town about getting a reprieve from paying those costs while we're in the middle of this pandemic facing these budget cuts.
As far as I know, I believe the only payment that we make to the town is to rent the concession stand for our team boosters and folks who want to use it, which is weird. And, you know, I have to say I've sat in on a number of meetings over the years with community services and athletics and facilities, and trying to kind of untie the knot of how all of these relationships have developed over the years. And you know, there's the flip side relationship of our renting space to community services for their childcare programs, and there's, you know, all the back and forth with staff, their staff working on the field, our staff doing, yeah. So it's very convoluted, but in terms of dollars and cents, the community services daycare program pays us for space, and when they use our buses, they cover the cost of the buses during summer rec, and then we pay $5,000, I believe it is, or maybe it's $3,000. I'd have to look it up, for the to use the concession stand and all of its equipment during the course of the school year. I'm sure Mike could speak more to that as well. I think he's going to check in with us later.
So the narrative that we pay to use the turf, for example, that we pay the town, that's inaccurate.
We don't have to rent the turf, no.
Okay.
not the field itself.
Just the concession stand.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
So what's the line? Oh, sorry, April, you had your hand up. You go.
Well, I wanted to go back to the turf. So if you want to stay on this, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, just real quick. One of the reductions was tennis court fees. So was that a fee that we were paying to community service?
No, that's to rent indoor courts off-site for bad weather.
Oh.
Our tennis courts aren't worth renting. I don't know if you've played on them, but nobody pays money for those.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
When the kids need to play indoors.
Go ahead, April.
So I just want to ask you, Sarah, maybe to make a note, or us as a finance committee, to get a better answer from town council about what exactly that budgeted turf CIP cost, what the intention of that is to cover, because it's certainly not enough money. And, you know, I've gotten some feedback that people still think that that's to do the whole replacement, which went out to bond and failed. So that's definitely not what that is. But if it was for remediation that needs to be done in order for us to play on the field, then that's a distinction I think the community needs to understand, because I'm certainly not prioritizing doing extraneous work on our facilities over our teacher positions. But if we get word from either our athletics department or the town staff that the field is not playable without that remediation, then that's something we need to inform our decision making.
I would just throw out there too that I think there's, because of that interplay between community services and athletics, I think there's also some concern. I know Mike raised it in another conversation that we had about if community services has to cut their budget. One of the things that they brought up was about paying for the lights for night games, and talking about not being able to do that. And so if athletics wanted to have night games, they'd have to pay that bill. And I have no idea what numbers are attached to that. And I have no idea whether that's actually an eventuality. But it goes to that whole conversation we've been having about that, the relationship and how one thing affects another.
Yeah, I think Paul and Don are both on, so hopefully they're listening. But I will drop, we'll make sure that we circle back to this. Maybe it's something we can discuss at the workshop next week. But yeah, good point. Cool. Okay.
So I'm going to drive down here to tier 2, and we can be guided by questions, or we can have Sandy and Diane chip in and talk about what's in here.
If you guys could just go through it, and then we'll jump in with questions, please. Thank you.
So with the just discretionary accounts, with you see there the curriculum conference, again, what cost center managers did is to go through line by line and make some reductions. Leadership Council worked on that, and it covers everything from conferences to curriculum with the power school, technology, equipment, staff development. Todd found some money with facilities and maintenance supplies, and we took 30,000 out of utilities, cut that by 4%. Again, this is kind of, I hope I'm not boring anybody, but it's pretty, what you see is what it is. Transportation bus drivers, reduction of 3 positions, and a receptionist at the central office. As you come into the office, we had a person there doing clerical work and greeting the staff. That's been reduced. K-12 tech specialist, we've realigned that position, and I believe that person is retiring, so we're not filling that. And then our IT field technician, I believe that's a shared position with the town, and we're reducing that. And our improvement strategist, that's a position that we've tried to realign and cast off those responsibilities in other areas. So in that whole section, there's 7 positions that we have eliminated per se.
So Sandy, I was confused about that, the retirement, or is it the K-12 tech specialist? So your proposal, if I understand it, is to eliminate that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think if we're going to take some of those responsibilities.
But then there's combined with the district information specialist position, which I think is the role that you had said last week that there's a retirement.
That's correct.
So your proposal is to keep the district information specialist position and to
Reduce
the person who's it sounds like is more in the field. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, I'd have to check on that, Alicia. I don't have those notes in front of me. I don't know, Diane, do you know on that one?
So again, if we take a look at these, basically, the K-12 tech specialist was that person's job is to take a look at all the use of technology applications in the district. As you know, we have some pretty stringent standards that we have in place before we allow students to access technology. And so that person was doing some of that. I certainly can bring Monique in to speak more to that. The other person who you talked about in terms of the retirement is a second person. And then we are also eliminating the K-12 improvement strategist. And so the idea was to take the main roles of each of those 3 positions and collapse them into one newly created position because of, you know, some of the pieces of 3 people's jobs, if you will. We've got to figure out what are the critical components that we need to continue to move forward.
So the $17,000 next to it with offset costs is combining that to pay for the district informational specialist program?
No, so the $17,000 next to it is that K-12 tech specialist isn't a retirement. That's a real person whose job would be eliminated by this proposal if the board moved forward with, you know, that recommendation. And so anywhere in this document where you see that $17,000 number, that number represents the amount of money that the school district would have to contribute towards that person's unemployment if in fact that person did not get another job, because as a school district we do not pay for unemployment insurance. Okay. And so we would be on the hook directly for that unemployment amount for the 39 weeks that individual would be eligible for those benefits.
So reducing that position doesn't reflect that full savings because we're funding their unemployment.
So we really wanted to make sure, as we considered any positional cuts that had to do with real people, that we were accounting for that, because that's an expense.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so from the accounting standpoint, at the bottom of each one of these tiers, you'll see the reduction value is here. I think you can see my little hand going around, and then the offsetting cost to the district of unemployment or other costs that we would incur is here, and your net reduction is what you would actually be saving. And so all through the document, if there's an individual who is going to be bumped out of a job by this move, then it's in yellow and there's an offsetting amount alongside there.
April, did you have a question? I saw you took yourself off mute.
No, I put my hand down. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to sort of belabor this, but those are some big chunky salaries. So I just want to make sure that we're clear, because I'm looking at the line item document, Kate, the adjustment document that you made, that shows like in yellow where you've made reductions on line items that correspond to what we're looking at now.
Right.
And I believe, if I'm correct, the K-12 improvement strategist position was originally funded out of the middle school principals line item. Is that correct?
Not in this current budget, no. It's under curriculum.
Okay.
And you'll find it in the first line of the curriculum and improvement of instruction section. It's the admin line 7100-2210-510400. And then there's two other lines, one for benefits and one for main PERS. I don't have that in front of me, but
Okay.
I'm hoping that I'm right.
Yeah, you are actually. Good. Nice job. So I guess the question then for me is on either the info specialist salary line or the line for the K-12 improvement strategist, it doesn't look like it's a reduction on the spreadsheet. So maybe just something to cross-reference and make sure that it adds up, because when I look at the line items, it doesn't seem like those roles are actually going away or being reduced.
So you don't see the line item with a yellow reduction?
I do for support staff, but it's only by 24,000. I don't see it under the curriculum admin, and nor do I see it under curriculum district info specialist.
Okay, I'll take a peek at it. I don't think I can pull it up at the same time I'm looking at this, but let me
Okay.
check that out.
Thanks.
Because yeah, I
Thank you.
do think that line item, a lot of the questions that we've had from some citizens in the town council have been based on those line items, individual lines. So I think it's important to make sure that I get those right. So I'll check that out.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask another question? So your proposal is to combine the K-12 tech specialist to make that part of the district informational specialist position's responsibility. Is that it? That's right?
You say that again?
The district informational specialist position is going to continue, and that is going to now encompass the K-12 tech specialist duties.
So the recommendation at this time would be to not have that position itself continue. The person who is currently in that position is retiring. So the idea would be to create a new position that again takes into account the key responsibilities of each of those three individuals.
And that includes what? The K-12 tech specialist, the district informational specialist position, and then the Kathy Terrell position?
Correct.
And where is that additional staff represented in this sheet, that new position?
So again, because it's something that's still in play, you don't see the elimination of the information specialist on this list, because
I see.
we're still working
gotcha.
out the job description and what that would entail.
Okay,
Right? There
sorry,
are a lot
Diane.
of moving parts in where we are currently.
It just,
Okay,
it seems,
I'm up to speed.
we would save so much more money though if we could, because we're losing the 17,000. First of all, somebody has to lose their job, right? And then we're also losing the unemployment benefits that we have to pay. And so
Yeah, I think there's a question there as to whether, because it's a retirement, right, that we're not backfilling. So is there an option to just not get rid of the K-12 and to then just not backfill the other role? And that way no one loses their job. And we save 120,
something.
I think it's a matter of looking at what
$12,000.
are the skills and qualifications that this new position would require.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's definitely been a theme in some of the feedback and questions that we've had, and I know it's a question I have personally. So some more information around that would definitely be helpful for you guys.
If it's helpful, I can also bring Monique into the conversation. I had to have Kelly make me a host again because as we were trying to reconfigure the YouTube, I had swapped that out with her. But I certainly can bring Monique into the conversation if you feel like you would like more information on that now.
April, Alicia?
Well, I mean,
Just in the interest of time.
I understand it now. I mean, that really
Okay.
answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can definitely bring her in though if we have more questions on it. Okay.
Perfect. Happy to help.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see, we are under lead teacher positions. And as you know, there's stipends for individuals in the schools to lead some committee work or clubs or whatever it is. And cost center managers, again, propose the following stipends to be reduced. And the big one is probably at Wentworth. And as you know, that's a large school. And what I remember Kelly talking about is trying to put a proposal together so that they could come up with a system to work, to have somebody oversee 504 and the after school programs. There's a lot of kiddos in the school, and it was in no way were they recommending another administrator or anything like that. It's just trying to get some stipends there to cover certain responsibilities in the school. And we felt that that was reasonable given the number of students. I'm trying to recall how many students, particularly with 504, that require those plans, but there was quite a few when you sit down with the parents and do the 504 plans. And then the high school department heads doesn't really reduce any position there, but it reduces release time and to try to, again, to get to the point where I think the struggle there is department heads feel a little stretched given some of their responsibilities and teaching during the day as well.
So this is a whole can of worms, but I'm just going to go for it because we're having the hard discussions right now. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten from the teachers in particular are that they would prefer to retain their lead teachers and consider a reduction in the instructional coaches. I was wondering if you could tell us how much we pay for instructional coaches and how much work they do directly with the students, because I don't know that.
So this is a place that I think that we should have Monique speak about more directly, since she works the most closely with the instructional coaches.
Okay.
So if that makes sense. I'm happy to bring her forward.
Sure, thank you.
I'll also just mention that an instructional coach from the point of view of a salary is simply a teacher, and so they're on the same salary scale as all the other teachers.
Correct.
The instructional coach.
There.
Okay.
They're part of the teachers' bargaining unit.
So is your point, Kate, that the implication, I guess, that if we were considering a reduction of instructional coaches, we'd have to go through the bargaining process or the RIF process?
No, I'm simply saying that when you said how much do we pay for instructional coaches, I want you to understand that they're paid in the same way that teacher is.
Thank you.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
I think Monique is with us now.
Hi, Monique.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So Sandy was just going through some of the proposed tier 2 reductions, which include lead teacher reductions. And my question, I guess my first was a comment that a lot of the feedback we've had from teachers in particular are that they would prefer to retain the lead teacher positions and in lieu of the instructional coaches. And so my question was, what do we pay for instructional coaches? And how much of their time do they spend? Because I don't fully understand those positions, or I have very limited understanding of instructional coaches other than I hear a lot of feedback about them. How much time do they spend directly with students?
Instructional coaches are paid on the teacher salary scale. So what they cost depends on their years of experience.
Okay.
And know that these lead teacher stipends and or the department head pieces, those are stipends in addition to teachers' salaries.
Okay.
So instructional coaches do not receive any additional stipends, yet they are lead teachers as they work supporting teachers' professional development. So depending on the phase level, for example, at the high school, we have 2 instructional coaches. One focuses on technology, the other supports the teachers across the school. And one teaches, one is a 0.8 instructional coach, and the other is a 0.6 instructional coach. So they teach, one teaches 1 class a semester, the other teaches 2 classes a semester. So they do have teaching duties at the high school. The middle school, the instructional coaches, one teaches approximately 0.5, the other teaches 0.8, and the other is 0.8. So, but that said, when there's a need for a long-term sub or a particular situation, they go into the classroom and pinch hit. During this distance learning period of time, if teachers are absent for longer periods of time, we've had instructional coaches going in and providing instruction to students and helping out in that way with direct instruction to students. At other phase levels, at 3-5, there are 3 instructional coaches. They're all full-time instructional coaches. That said, they will provide enrichment activities to students. They participate in multidisciplinary team meetings, MDT meetings, as sometimes they're called. They also do a lot of the data work that the improvement strategist position had been doing and supporting them with. And K2, there are 3, and they are full-time, at present, full-time coaches. You will note further down in these tiers that we have reduced instructional coaches. So they also do things that, in the absence of instructional coaches, teachers are going to have to pick up some of those responsibilities in terms of curriculum coordination, some of the data work, scheduling, the assessment responsibilities, and special events that would take place in the schools. That would then fall on lead teachers.
So we have 11 instructional coaches, Monique, district-wide?
In terms of positions, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, in terms of positions, but that's not, they're not 100%
Dedicated
coaching.
to, right. Now, if you have both instructional coaches and you have lead teachers, is that right?
Yes, lead teachers who receive stipends, yes.
Okay.
And, you know, conceptually, they're all lead teachers because they're under a teacher contract. They're just leading in different ways.
Gotcha. Okay.
The way in which we compensate the teachers who are instructional coaches is with release time from classrooms. Years ago, lead teachers in buildings had release time as well as a stipend. But what happened during challenging economic times in the past, we pulled that release time away from lead teachers and increased the stipends. And as a result of scheduling shifts at the high school department had still continued, some of the department heads still continue to have that release time. So in that line item piece, that proposal, because it doesn't have a dollar amount there, because it's really about pulling that release time off of their schedule so that they could be available to teach an additional section, which is an equity issue, brings it, that lead teacher structure more in line across K-12.
Can I ask you this? If you looked at it only, if you sort of took out the philosophical differences of lead teacher versus instructional coach, isn't it more cost effective to use the lead teacher model?
It depends on what the activity is. In other words, in order for lead teachers to become professional development providers to their colleagues, that would require training, and it also requires time in order to be in classrooms or modeling lessons or doing the additional curriculum work or coordinating events. So the lead teachers, by just adding a stipend, that means that the additional work would need to happen outside of the school day. In order to provide effective professional development, it needs to happen during the school day. And that is one of the challenges as instructional coaches have picked up more classes. They have been less available to provide supports to teachers and are in fewer classrooms and providing supports and able to respond to teacher requests because they have course loads.
I'm confused. If we're looking at it from the district perspective, if we wanted to get some of that instructional benefit, if we looked at the lead teacher model versus the instructional coach model, isn't there a cost savings to the district associated with the lead teacher model?
Yes, but I'm not sure that the return on investment is
Right.
as strong as the instructional coach, because with the lead teacher model, there is no time during the school day to be able to provide services.
Right.
The data on effective coaching, instructional coaching models is pretty clear in that there needs to be a relatively small number of teachers and that the coach needs to have the time to interact with the classroom teachers in order to see the gains, both in terms of the teachers and in terms of the students.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Monique, just a question along the same lines. I guess I don't have a ton of knowledge other than what you've explained this year and last year in terms of what the actual instructional coaches do. It's a newer concept to me, but I do appreciate your explanation, and I can also see the value in it. The thing I'm trying to balance is, like Alicia said, a lot of the feedback we've received has been in support of lead teachers over that of instructional coaches. And I guess I'm just, what I think we're trying to be mindful of is collecting feedback from a lot of different angles. And I'm just curious, I think it's a relatively new position in the grand scheme of education. And if you have any data or have done any surveys or anything that you can provide that shows the value of that the instructional coaches provide to the teachers whom they're supposed to be providing it to.
I'm happy to get that information to you and the research around instructional coaches. I'm happy to get that to you. It is, I can see where it's a very difficult decision. The lead teacher model as it is now really focuses on building management activities, that focus, and less so on providing professional development to their colleagues. So we've had conversations at the Leadership Council about the different purposes and opportunities for teachers, because it really is supporting growing teacher leadership and involvement in the school community. And we all know that great teachers are continuous learners. And so it is a model to try to provide that support for teachers. As we move forward and we have to experience reductions in a variety of areas, we are going to be looking at shifting responsibilities in order to ensure that we're supporting the teaching and learning for all students.
So can I jump in? One thing that I would like more information about, Monique, as we think more about this model, is how the model works at different phase levels. I imagine that a lead teacher model might work better at different phase levels than others, or instructional coach model might work differently at different phase levels. And so some information, if you did have information on specifically Scarborough, broken down into phase levels, I think would be particularly helpful. And just as I'm sitting here listening, I'm getting the impression that because of budgetary constraints or because of time constraints on our faculty, that the optimal instructional coach model is not something that we're able to provide right now. And so looking at whether or not being able to have instructional coaches but not using them to the fullest benefit because of all of these other constraints, and whether or not that's something we need to talk about as a district in terms of our values.
I wonder if it would be helpful, what I'm hearing a concern about the loss of lead teachers or that trade-off. And I think Diane might be able to speak to the fact that on this list, we're talking about reducing stipends, that there still will be lead teachers at the middle school and at the Wentworth School.
Yeah, so at the middle school, this proposal would maintain community lead teachers. So that means that there would be a lead teacher for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, as well as a special services lead teacher, an encore lead teacher. These inquiry lead teachers are the teachers that are the head of their own team, for lack of a better word. So the folks who are the lead for their team of 3 or 4 teachers. So we wouldn't be dismantling the entire lead teacher governance process. That would still be part and parcel of that. And at the Wentworth School, there would still retain those colored learning community lead teachers would still be in place.
If we got to the point where we had to say, or well, not that we had to say, where we were assessing whether we wanted to get rid of a high school teacher position or fill it with a instructional coach position, could you make that transition one to one?
It depends on a specific individual certification, right?
Okay.
So if I was a high school science teacher and my job was being eliminated, and you wanted to fill it with an instructional coach, well, if that instructional coach doesn't have a science certification, they can't necessarily slide into that job.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Ready to move on? Athletics?
Yes, I think so. Thanks, Monique.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Monique.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to read each one. I think you can kind of take a glance and look at the athletics and activities that are proposed to be either eliminated or reduced. And again, not that we want this to happen, but Mr. Legage worked very hard on this with his team. It's painful. I know it's painful to our athletes and to our students with the clubs. But as you can see, we've come up with a number of areas to have the board consider for reductions. if you have real specifics, like how many students might be on a particular team or the impact, like on the school newspaper, if you have questions, I'm sure Mike can jump in and answer any specific questions that you have.
I feel like so conflicted about this. The sports and clubs that we're proposing to take away, in some respects, when we say they are the activities that may be have the least enrollment, for example, I worry that those are the kids that need those activities the most. And so it makes me so sick to think about losing that. And you know, I'm sure the questions that we're asking have to be so annoying to ask. But I mean, just the thought of you know, these kids that this is their spot and this is where they thrive, and to think that that's going to be missing, I can't. For me, we've got to figure out a way to make it work, and that's my mindset at this point, is how can we make it work. And so I read his boosters response. I'm just really wondering, I mean, I understand it's not the philosophy that the district supports, and I understand why, and I think it's a sound rationale, but I'm just, you know that we have such an engaged parent population, and can't we just tap into it somehow in the interim to get us through it and avoid those cuts? The thought of it keeps me up at night. And so I'd like to start with you, I guess, first, Sandy, because I know Wyndham has a big booster organization, and hear if you have any ideas about how we can sort of make that work.
Well, I'm with you, Alicia, as far as I think this is all these reductions here will have an impact on students. And I like your example. I think that you might not be an athlete, but you might be really good at in the newspaper and having a product for the school. And so again, I think what we tried to do is every cost center manager had to come up with some reductions. Whether the boosters could afford this, my experience with that is some years you have parents that might fundraise, and then other years it's a different group of parents. And what we found is that the consistency might not be there from year to year. That's the risk. I'll give you an example. Skiing, we had a lot of interest for kiddos to be on the ski team, but we couldn't find a coach. And that was an example where there was a need. We felt like we could find the money because we had the money from the past. But in that situation, we just couldn't find a coach or any particular parent that could coach that as well. The equity issue is also something that, again, I'm not a scientist or understand all the ins and outs with the athletic and activities program, but I can tell you equity is most important to us. And when you get into fundraising, you got to make sure that you're going to think of equity, and that would be important. I know Mike has feelings about this as well, and I think most of these administrators, we've lived through this in the past, and honestly, if we value these components, then we should fund them. And that's not to say that we are proud to put this up there to be reduced, but we felt like we had to take a little bit of every area, and that's what we asked Mike to do. I think we'd be criticized to reduce classroom teachers and not look at athletics and activities.
So where does the booster money go now, and how is it spent?
Let's pull Mike in on that, if that's
Okay.
possible.
Thank you.
So
I
unfortunately,
don't actually think
Yeah, my
Yeah,
current high school administrators are, I just texted him, are still completing their distribution of signs to all of the seniors today.
Oh, yeah.
I think that their intention was that they were going to have that completed before this meeting, but as you can imagine, driving around to all of the parts of Scarborough and sharing in the celebration of sharing these signs has taken longer than expected.
I can try and jump in with a little bit of information. I'm certainly not an expert, but the boosters are, most of our booster clubs do their banking through the high school activity account. They have a budget that they present to Mike every year through the coaches. And the idea is that they are able to provide, in most cases, things that are not fundamental, essential components of the program. So for example, if a booster club wanted to buy jackets or provide a banquet or pay for a piece of equipment that the school district wasn't able to afford, I believe that Mike's numbers that I've seen in the past have been from $300,000 to $500,000 a year coming in from boosters, in additional spending over and above what we budget for athletics and activity. So it's absolutely a huge piece of what we're able to do. The way that it is spent is by collaboration between the athletics department, the individual coaches for the teams, and the booster officers to decide how they can best support the team and what they're fundraising for.
Is there ever any collaboration between the different booster groups or like a general booster fund? Are they all unique?
That is such a great question, Sarah. And it's like a little bit the elephant in the room with boosters, because booster clubs are typically super passionate about their sport or their, what their child is participating in. But there are districts where they have one generic athletic boosters club or activities booster club, and all the fundraising goes to that one organization and then is spent by the district based on the needs of the students. And that is one way that a district can avoid some of these worries about equity and Title IX considerations and putting the funds where they can do the best for kids rather than having one booster group be super successful at fundraising and having a ton of money, and another booster group either being, another team either not having a booster group at all or, being less successful in raising money.
Yeah, my thinking with that question, right, is we know from the past when we eliminate a program, it takes a long time for us to get it back. And so if there's an opportunity to, although I agree with the strategy that if we want it, we should fund it. But these are unprecedented times, right? And so I think we need to be creative, and we've gotten a lot of feedback on all of these activities and wanting to retain them. And I guess I'm just wondering if there's a way that we could maybe creatively reach out to some of these boosters. You said, I think you just said $300,000. I mean, I don't know what specific booster that was for, but that's a lot of money. And I think if maybe they would be willing to shave off $2,000 so we can keep the Composers Club, that feels like a realistic ask. And I guess I'm just asking if there's an opportunity for us to think outside the box here in order to not lose the program, so we have the hopes of retaining them, next year and in the future. And Sandy, if that's something that maybe you can pick up with Mike, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Can I jump in? I totally agree with what you guys are saying. I think one thing to keep perspective on is that this is not like a fundamental or a philosophical shift in the way that the district looks at boosters, but that maybe this is a one-time approach that we take given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So we're certainly, I think, as a district, not wanting to rely on boosters. I support that philosophy. I think right now what the Finance Committee is leaning towards is just seeking whatever, you know, one-time creative solutions that we can come to, like having volunteer ticket takers rather than paying people this year, you know, just whatever we can do to kind of alleviate some of this pressure that's on the budgetary side of offering these programs. The other thing that I wanted to add, and I'm a little bit of a broken record, but that's okay, is when we look at all of these activities, nobody wants to see our activities for our students limited. But in terms of the budget, I'm struggling with this idea that we're going to offer certain activities while also keeping our kids healthy during a time of uncertainty. And I feel like in other areas of the budget, we are trying to be really responsible and plan for increased measures, and we're budgeting for those things. And I'm worried that we're going to incur costs in order to run some of these programs that are not being asked for right now in terms of this budget. And so I just want to, again, I know Mike said that there wasn't really any direction coming from the state that certain programs weren't going to be offered in the fall for health reasons, but just I think that there's a little bit of an elephant in the room here, that if we are going to offer wrestling, we're also going to have to find a way to offer it in a way that's healthy and safe for our kids. And I don't know if that can be accommodated in our current budget.
I have a couple of thoughts on that. I guess I'm channeling Mike at the moment since he's out being Santa. So as far as the fall sports are concerned, you're right, there's not a lot, well, there's a lot of guidance, it just changes every day. And so what we've done for that so far is, I believe Mike has shared with you a document that talks about the individual game costs for fall sports. And his concept behind that was to say, well, if we have a truncated season, if we have a shortened season, if we have restrictions on what kids are allowed to participate in, what would that look like in terms of potential budget savings? The other piece is around safety, and Joe Davis is our athletic trainer. Dr. Davis has been right at the forefront of learning about the COVID-19 requirements and what he can do to step in and help out in terms of keeping our athletes safe. And he's actually reached out and gotten some information about equipment and supplies for things like taking kids' temperatures, same things our nurses are looking at, taking kids' temperatures, more hand sanitizers, more sanitary equipment to take care of athletic equipment. So there's a lot of thought going into how to keep kids safe in this new environment. And I hear what you're saying, April, in terms of, well, do we have enough money to do that? And I think that, it's hard to answer until we have some real understanding of what the season's going to look like. But I think we're going to end up diverting some of our normal equipment spending to things like that. Things like PPE or whatever our, new acronym of the day is.
Great, thank you, Kate.
And you're right, it may come down to the fact that MPA says, well, gosh, I guess we really can't do football because it's a contact sport. And, we hope that's not the case, but who knows? I'm just worried that some of these things are going to become cost prohibitive. We're trying to slice every penny out of this budget that we can. And it would just be it's really difficult for me from a planning perspective and someone who's trying to make such thoughtful decisions to plan on hosting and offering certain athletic events without knowing whether those are going to be cost prohibitive, and then also, putting the health of our kids first and foremost. And we're making accommodations in the classroom, but it doesn't sound like we have a really, set of clear guidance for our athletic events yet. Just hard.
Mm. Hey guys, just in the interest of time, I do want to get to make sure we leave enough time for public comment. Are we able to just kind of quickly go through tier 3 and tier 4. I think that's over to you, Sandy.
Yes, okay. How much time do you need for public comment?
I want to start public comment around like just after 2:50, so we only have about 5 minutes.
Okay, okay. So here we have, as far as after-school programs, the high school, middle school co-curricular stipends. And again, not proud to stand here and say that we're going to reduce these stipends, but that's our recommendation at this point in time, given what we're up against. And just kind of glancing through this, I think you can see the variety that we have there. This is an instrument, you know, again, this is part of the high school, middle school culture is it's not always about athletics. There are other opportunities that we value. And this is just tough to put this stuff out there as the stipends for the advisors, not to have those. Unless you have questions, I'd be happy to take a stab at it, but it's pretty concrete what you see there. And what I can't answer for you is the numbers. I just don't know like how many people go out for chorus or the speech and debate team. I don't have that information in front of me.
I don't have any
I don't
specific
either.
questions on this tier. Okay, so we can go to tier 4 then.
Okay, so the K2 teacher position, retain 3 of the 4 positions in the new proposals. We're not excited about increasing class size, but I would say that it's reasonable what the numbers will be at. It wouldn't have a significant impact on students. I think if I put my teacher hat on, the more students that you put in a particularly an elementary classroom, it becomes more of a challenge. But I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I think we, with a straight face, can live with the idea of what class sizes will be. And again, it's not our first choice. Our first choice would not to necessarily have class sizes go up, but we feel that at this point in time, this is a recommendation that we could live with. As far as the average class size at Wentworth School will be 20 to 22. And there are 2 retiree positions that we're not going to fill. So that makes it a little bit easier, knowing that we're not reducing staff members at that level. In the high school, we're looking at 4 positions. And I can't read on my screen. Okay, do you know what those positions are? I'm not sure it's listed in that block.
I think Sue's intent there was to take each major content area and reduce 1 position from each.
Yeah.
I just want to say that that's something that I can't live with. For me, that a budget that includes those reductions is a budget that I can't support. And knowing that that's why we're here, and in particular knowing the needs of the kids that are coming in at K2, looking at that is devastating to me. I can't reconcile that in my mind, and so I don't know what we have to do moving forward for that, but that's going to be a focus of mine, is just to come up with an alternative for that.
I couldn't agree more, Alicia. Fundamentally, I can't. I just don't know how I could possibly support a budget that increases our class sizes, given the circumstances we're under and how concerned and frightened people are going to be.
Yeah.
I understand that this is hard, and making all of these, this is not a personal criticism of anybody who put so much work into these proposals. It's just that is not something that I can support.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I feel the same way, and obviously a lot of the feedback that we've gotten has been, and I think we all agree with, we want to retain our teachers and our staff where possible, as a priority. So I think, that's the work of us to do as a finance committee, and obviously in collaboration with you guys, Sandy, Kate, Diane, and figure out not only where we can be creative on sort of the athletics side and, talking to booster groups or whatever, but also where we can look for other reductions in lieu of some of these. Our goal from town council most likely isn't going to change upwards. It's only going to go, if anything, down. Hopefully not. So at least we know what our number is. I think now it's just up to us to make sure that it's something that we can support as a finance committee and ultimately recommend to the board in terms of what those line item reductions are. And this tier 4 is just something that I personally as well cannot right now get on board with.
I think what you're finding is what we felt as a team. As you get down into the tiers, it increasingly becomes harder to find the amount of money that is being asked of us. And this was very hard work for the administrative team. No one wants to reduce that number of staff. And certainly I'm willing, and I know my team's willing to go back and try to find another close to 700,000 in other areas, but it really is a labor intensive organization. It's about people, and we'll need your help with that as a board and as a team, because it becomes painful. And I'm most open to look at any other considerations with your assistance would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think part of our responsibility as well too is to communicate what these reductions mean to town council. And if we don't, I think we've already all communicated that we don't necessarily support the 2%, but that is what it is. If there's an opportunity for us to fight harder to try and get maybe change some minds, hearts and minds, then I think we should definitely do that. And I think everyone's willing to do that as well. Okay. I do want to get to public comment. April, Alicia, do you guys have anything else that you want to ask?
No. Thank you.
Okay, so actually, before I get to public comment, let me just talk through the kind of next steps. We have another finance committee meeting on Tuesday. The goal of that meeting is really to prepare for the department review with the town council finance committee meeting, which is Tuesday afternoon, and then the budget workshop on Wednesday. So I know you guys had sent through an additional proposal that I think got us to a little closer to 0, which is what the exercise is that town council has asked us to do for next week. We obviously didn't have time to review that today. I think that's okay. We'll get to that on Tuesday and make sure that we're all in sort of alignment in what we'll be presenting to town council workshop next week. Sound fair?
If I could, yep, I realized I did have one more thing I wanted to say. And again, I'm not trying to run anybody through the ringer here, but I would be not being honest about the feedback that we got, Sandy, about the calls that were made to our probationary teachers. If I said that the feedback we got as a board that we solicited sent a message to us that those teachers believe that they were reduced because of the budget. And for me, sitting on the finance committee, to have a teacher tell me that they feel like their contract was not renewed because of a budgetary constraint that we have not yet set, I have a really hard time reconciling those two things.
So the intent with the statute of Maine is to notify probationary people. In no way were we trying to tell people that they're all out of a job. It's more, given the proposed budget, whether or not it passes, whether it changes, though the ins and outs, you're a probationary teacher, and by state law, we have to notify you that you may be at risk. We don't know how deep this is going to go. We don't know how far down the list we'll end up with probationary reductions. And I don't know if there's any good way of doing this, and I'll be reflective about it. But again, we were advised to make sure to get those notices out, and we did the personal touch the best we could to tell people about it as well. My hope is that we don't have to go down that list at all. But I understand your frustration, April. I hear it.
I'm glad that April brought that up, Sandy, and I appreciate so much that you deferred those phone calls to the people that really have the relationships with the recipients of the phone calls. I'm wondering if it might be beneficial to now follow it up with a letter just to explain, because when you receive a phone call like that, I'm sure you're in shock and emotional. You may not process all of that information, and I'm just wondering if we could sort of follow up with a letter to those individuals, just explaining to them that the budget hasn't been finalized, it hasn't been vetted by the board, no decisions have been made, that they were notified only because of the statutory requirement, and that we're working our hardest to try to avoid that.
We'll do that.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
You bet.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yep.
Okay, let's go then to public comment. Just as a reminder, if you're on the Zoom meeting, if you just raise your hand, and if you're watching, actually, I guess you're not watching via YouTube because it wasn't working. So yeah, if you just raise your hand, we'll go ahead and bring you in. Just unmute yourself, state your name and your address, and then whatever you want to say. And Hillary, I think your hand is up.
I think I'm on still. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't want to take up too much time from any other people who are members of the public, but I just wanted to thank Sara and Alicia and April for advocating for those teacher positions that have direct impact, or have them. I guess every teaching position has a direct impact on our students, but for those teaching positions that are in tier 4, and I just wanted to say that I agree with you. I don't think that raising our class sizes is okay at any time, but certainly not right now when we may be in a situation in the fall that we have no control over, where we may need to reduce our class sizes by half. And you know, adding 1 student to a classroom may not seem like much, but when you're a 2nd grade teacher and you already have 22 kids in your class, that represents a lot of extra work to add students to any class. And I don't just mean in elementary school. I was just using that as an example. I think it's the case for any teacher teaching in any classroom, like that the more you add, the more work you're going to have. And it's not always proportional to the number of students, because if you already have 20 students, adding 1 more student represents a lot of work. So I just wanted to put that out there, that that I support that, and I hope to hear some really good ideas about how we can work together to try and save those jobs.
Thanks, Hillary. Diane, do you mind bringing in the first public comment?
Sure, I can definitely do that. It would be Crystal asked.
I think we have.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep, you can hear you. Yeah. Yeah, if you can bring Crystal in.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal, you should be with us now.
I am, I think. Can you hear me, Sarah?
We can, yeah.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, my name is Crystal Ash Cuthbert. I am president of the SEA for Scarborough. Sara, clarification, and either you may know the answer, another member of the Finance Committee. The documents that you shared, that were shared on the screen today, the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, those were created by administrators, and your staff is wondering, your faculty and support personnel is wondering that when you as a finance committee and then ultimately the board in the end approve the budget, do you approve what administration has proposed, or can you pull an earmark and change that proposal if it's the will of the board?
Yeah, I believe, and Alicia and April can correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, I mean, that's the process that we're going through, right? Is we're saying, you know, the end number, let's just say for now, is not going to change, right? Because that was the first reading of the town council. So the end number is at this moment, let's just say it's not up for debate, but what makes up that number is what we're challenging and what's up for debate. So that's certainly what these conversations are, and ultimately what we end up recommending to the board will come at our second reading.
Okay, but it is possible for the Finance Committee to recommend to the board, we think that we should keep, like, let's say the high school speech and debate club, but then get rid of this, right? So you got the Finance Committee has that authority. So it's not just like, here's the check and spend it as you will, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that was my first question. So Claire, thank you for clarifying that. I know it's important to the members that I represent. The second thing is I wanted to make sure that the members of the board, because this just came up, that you are aware that the actually four people that have called and or spoken to me that were told they were being non-renewed, were being told they were non-renewed because the board told the administrator to do that. I want to give you an alternative option. Yes, it is true that during the probationary time, administrators or district can let a probationary teacher go with no reason. Like, yeah, you're just not a good fit. I don't really like you personally. Shuffle off to Buffalo. However, if an administrator feels that that is a valuable member of our staff, we would really hate to let them go, they are already on a RIF list. Okay, so as soon as you're hired, you're put on the RIF list. Now, you might be the bottom of that RIF list, but you're on the RIF list. Now, by being put on a RIF list instead of being non-renewed, then that means that, let's say somebody at the high school decided to take an administrative position, and that position opened up, their classroom position opened up, that would mean that the person RIF'd could be invited back to that position. When they are non-renewed, the district is done with them. They have no obligation to bring them back. They have no obligation to offer them another position. It's done. The relationship with that person is done. And I think that we are looking at that incorrectly, okay? Yes, is non-renewal the easiest, cleanest cut? Sure. But opting to put them on the RIF list, knowing that they can be RIF'd, gives them other options than, yep, you're done. And I think that we need to look at that differently, because when you're non-renewed, especially if you're applying for another position, if you're non-renewed, that has a different implication than I was RIF'd. And it especially, I heard Alicia say that not only does she want to keep those positions, but that she was concerned that those calls came in. People were told that you guys, that the board wanted that done. So if that's not the case, then I can call back some people that called me crying yesterday. And I just think there's a different way to do what we have to do as a district that does not require complete separation, but non-renewing them is the final thing. And what is concerning for me, just as the association president, is that people are being told their job will be, that they're going to be non-renewed, but then they're given assurances that are similar to a RIF situation, like you'll be the first one we call back. That's illegal. You can't do that. As soon as that person's non-renewed, they would have to reapply. And so, really looking into this, and I need you to know that I've shared those exact feelings with your administrative team. I said, I think there's a better way to go about this that secures those great teachers for Scarborough and at least gives them an opportunity to come back. And that was not per the board. Those people were told that the board made that decision. And I would really encourage the board to look at that in a different light.
Thanks, Krista. I appreciate those comments. I think we'll take this offline and probably have a conversation with Sandy and Diane how we can take that forward, but I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I think there's one other public comment, Denise Blaine. Diane, if you don't mind bringing her in. Denise, you'll just have to unmute yourself and then you're free to speak.
Can you hear me?
I think you might. Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. So I just had two clarifying questions. In this budget proposal, there's some things that have been added in response to COVID. Is the district expecting any support from the state, since these are state requirements, financially to help with that burden, or are they just coming right out of our pockets? Do you have any idea about that, Sarah?
Kate, do you mind picking that one up? I think we are expecting some funds, but I believe they're quite limited.
Yeah, what's been offered so far to the states from the feds in terms of support for K-12 education is part of the CARES Act that the U.S. government passed. Actually, there are several different plans that they've passed in the past few weeks. What we've heard so far is that there will be money sent to the state of Maine, and that it will be allocated along the same formula as is used for Title I funds that also come from the feds. We know in Scarborough that right now we get a little over $100,000 in Title I monies. So we've been led to believe and understand that we're likely to get somewhere in the range of $100,000 from the state of Maine and through the feds. The state is currently, they have the application process on hold because they're waiting for some more distribution guidance from the U.S. Department of Education, but that's what we know so far.
Okay, thanks, Kate. And my second question is, the last time I joined one of these meetings, I asked the question about some things that I didn't see being reduced, and asked if they were off the table. I'm assuming that the Finance Committee has had a chance to look at this proposal, and I'm wondering now if you have a better feel about some of these items that were in the original budget. For example, actual curriculum renewals and such, that are those things going to be looked at? Because I'm just seeing the same things, even with the line item, which Kate was amazing. A lot of those things, when I went through the budget, I thought this can wait and this can wait, but I'm still not seeing some of those other things that I feel like have been talked about as being off the table, particularly curriculum refreshes. So I was just wondering if there's been any discussion about those within the finance committee.
I'd like to
Yeah.
answer part of that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So one of the questions that we had was about the math and focus curriculum. And we did ask for additional information about that. And it's my understanding, based on that response, that if we didn't support this math curriculum investment currently, that there would be no online resources available for students. That curriculum is no longer supported. I think it was 9 years old, and obviously that's concerning, as if we're going to be faced with distance learning potentially in the fall, and you know, even I guess in general, is my thought as a parent. I mean, I'm not a teacher, and so that, you know, that's a hard. That's why we ask all these questions, because we're relying on your responses to tell us whether it's important or not. And so it's been interesting to hear teacher feedback about the curriculum and say, I'm not really sure that we need that investment right now, and then hear other responses that this is really necessary. So for me, the online component seems critical at this juncture, but I'm always open to hear other perspectives.
And just finally, my last thing is that I heard a lot about you guys receiving feedback from staff about some things that we could do without. I've already wrapped my brain around that I'm going to do without things. Are you sharing those with administration? Because there seems to be a huge disconnect between what they think we need and what we, the frontline in the room people, say we need. And I'll tell you right now, I need Amber Russo, who just got non-renewed, because she carried 94 students last year. I need her on my team to deliver the best education possible. I can do without my online subscription to something, but I feel like there's a huge disconnect between what admin, the administrative team, thinks we need and what frontline people can need. And that's my soapbox, and thank you for listening to me, as always. I appreciate it.
I don't know if you were here at the beginning of the meeting, Denise, but one of the observations that I had was sort of what you're describing, and you know, it's all about perception, I think, and what your responsibilities are in an organization. But that, you know, and obviously administration has a different, ultimately a different responsibility, that with the focus on students. But you know, that was my observation as well, and my one of my first statements was that I see that as presenting an opportunity for the district to make changes and to try to conquer that divide, and see if there are ways to collaborate and find out why you each have those different perspectives. And so I think that that could be a really great opportunity for both sides, and it's probably overdue, given the fact that it seems like that exists. So thanks.
It's as simple as an ask, Alicia. They just need to ask. That's it.
Denise, I'll just add to that, because there may be some other people that have this wonder as well. So the survey that we sent out, we were collecting responses to literally like minutes leading up to this meeting. And the administrative team does have access to it, but I think we'll, you know, compile it maybe in a more consolidated way that we can share that feedback with them as well. I do appreciate everyone who took the time to fill that out. I want you to know that it's not going on deaf ears. We are using it. We are taking it into consideration. This proposal that you see on the screen now, I know it doesn't look too different than the last one you saw, but it does actually take into consideration some of the feedback they've received from the board, which we've received from teachers or community members. And then the next version of this, a later version of this, you'll see will have the board's feedback included in it. But that will be, I can't guarantee at this point when that will be, just because there's a lot more work that has to happen between now and then. So I appreciate this is a long process, but wanted most important thing to get out of that is that we heard your feedback, we're taking it into consideration, and we're applying it to our recommendation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really proud of you as a former student of mine. You're doing a great job. You make me proud every day. So thank you.
Thank you. You're making me blush. Let's get her off. Put her on mute. Put her on mute.
Sarah, you're all
I think
grown
we have
up.
one more. I think we have one more public comment. Denise, if you don't mind bringing Sarah Blaisdell in. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I just had one further question about the math and focus that you guys spoke about. The K-5, and this is coming actually from a parent, not as a teacher, even though I am a teacher. The K-5 distance learning plan has been amazing for both of my children, but math and focus is not being used online currently with the K-5 distance learning plan. So if we're saving that for next year in the case of needing to use it, I'm not quite sure if that is a good use of money since it's not being used currently for our current digital learning plan.
I think, Sandy, unless you have a direct response to that, I think that's something we just have to take offline and look into. Yeah, but thank you for that feedback, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm just looking. Is there another public comment? I know we want to wrap this up, but I see that Crystal has another comment to make. So I'll bring her back in, Diane. Go ahead, Chris. You just need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I forget I'm worse than the kids. Just for the finance committee's knowledge that about the questions Sarah just asked, right now, I know that at the intermediate level, excuse me, at Wentworth, we are using online resources to meet the target area that is found within our current math and focus documents. So we are still teaching finding the area of a triangle that is not a right triangle. We're still teaching that. We're finding free online resources for that, free videos out there, free activities. And we can also assign that as a iReady lesson is another alternative. We haven't, but that is an option. So the idea that we have to get the new curriculum to be able to teach it online is not accurate. Would they have access to that worksheet that's page 72 in their workbook? Yep. But that is not it is not necessary for us to teach math. And for the cost of 2 teachers, as Denise said earlier, I'd rather keep Amber.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly check the inbox, see if anything has come through. And it has not, so I think we can go ahead and end it there. Thank you guys very much. I know we ran over, so appreciate you guys hanging on. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And we'll connect at our next finance committee meeting on Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Sarah and everybody.